time to cut the cake and grab the champagne glasses as Fleetwood celebrates their one-year anniversary. Boasting one of the most sophisticated sound systems on the East Coast, musicians love what they hear, and so does the audience. No wonder Fleetwood's has quickly established itself as one of America's premier blues clubs. Fleetwood's.
What a nice place to start with.
44 Trans-Potomac Canal Center in Old Town, Alexandria, Virginia, just outside the nation's capital.
Everything turned around. Packing up, checking up, so you won't do. If I could, baby, I'd give you my world. Open up, everything's waiting for you.
Hello there, this is Catfish Hod.
This is Smoking Joe Kubik.
Hi, this is Jim McCarthy. You're listening to the Blues Room, live at Fleetwood's.
We were fortunate enough to catch up with Mick Fleetwood a little earlier and talk to him about the club here at Fleetwood's and also about his background in the blues.
Welcome to the Blues Room and welcome to your own club.
Oh, thank you very much.
Mick, people may think that your interest in the blues is a diversion, but the reality is that Fleetwood Mac started as a blues band, and I believe the first gig that you did was during the Summer of Love, was a British Jazz Blues Festival in '67. You remember that?
Yes, I do. August 67, the Windsor Jazz Festival. And it was a great gig. I actually looked at a picture of the original band with Peter Green, Jeremy Spencer, myself, and actually a bass player called Bob Brunning played the first few weeks, and then John McVie joined, as we wanted him to. He left John Mayall a short while after. The crazy thing was like there was actually, I would think, about 50,000 people, and the PA system was so small. It was unbelievable. It was a tiny WEM system, and we thought, I always remember that gig because we'd just been playing clubs a lot, and that particular setup was the most awesome thing that I'd ever seen in my life, you know. But looking back on it, in this day and age, it's very different.
Well, from watching Robert tonight and having had him in the Blues Room before, Elmore James was a big influence, and I think the first single I ever heard of yours, I was in high school in April of, I think, '67. It was Double Trouble and It Hurts Me Too, and you were with Mayall. And you know, you did that way before Eric Clapton did Double Trouble in the '70s, and It Hurts Me Too. But what I'm trying to get at is Clapton left the Yardbirds in the mid-'60s because he felt they were too commercial and they had abandoned their direction as far as sticking with the blues. You, McVie, and Green, you were in Mayall's unit, the Blues Breakers, an ideal situation for a blues man. Why did you leave?
I was fired. Quite simple. I was with John Mayall for a very short while. Ainsley Dunbar, I thought a great drummer, still is a great drummer, but very technically minded, and I think he got a little too busy for Peter Green, and Peter persuaded John Mayall to put me in the band, because I played with Peter Green many years before. But the likes of myself and John McVie, we both were very heavy drinkers. He was an exceptionally heavy drinker, and the two of us together was too much, and one of us had to go, and it certainly wasn't going to be John McVie. So I got fired after about 2 months, but I had a great time. It was in good humor. We had a great time, and John Mayall is still a real good friend of mine, and we often laugh about it. But that's the fact of the matter. I got fired for drunken, disorderly behavior.
You're listening to the Blues Room live at Fleetwood's. Our guest, the legendary Mick Fleetwood and Robert Lighthouse. And Robert is with us, and you, of course, have picked up on Robert here in the Washington area. Can you tell us your assessment of Robert as a musician?
Oh, he's terrible now. Well, I first met Robert when we were putting this club together. In fact, it hadn't even been built properly at that point. And I thought it was a good idea for me to... The audition word is not really the correct thing. There's an element of that, but mostly for me, I didn't know any players here really at all. And I thought it was an appropriate thing to get to know some local players, and Robert turned out to be one of the guys who I met. It reminded me, in terms of his personage and his talent, was it's this, you either have got that thing, that special thing, or you don't. There are a lot of players who purport to play the blues, and they're having a lot of fun doing it, I might add, and it's fine, because whatever you want to do, you're enjoying it, that's fine. But for me, there are very few players, you know, and certainly that dreaded word, black and white players, but it's a fact, you know. I hate to make those analogies, but it's true. When you get a player, I got spoilt with Peter Green, who is an incredible and was an incredible blues player. This man here has that element that makes him special.
That's quite a compliment, Robert, because I believe Peter Green was tagged as an Anglo B.B. King as far as his guitar playing went when he was a kid.
Well, I mean, it's the thing. Peter made that transition from, he started off as a bass player, and he just had something that was real special, you know, and I saw B.B. King the other night in Las Vegas, and every single time I bump into B.B., in fact, I'm hoping to see him tonight, he always asks about Peter Green. He always remembers exactly the last time he played with Peter Green, and he always lets me know that he was the guy that came out of England, period. It's a good feeling, you know, and it's a shame for me, because Peter's withdrawn, you know, from the music scene, and he's missed. I miss him, and it's a selfish thing. I sort of sometimes think, I wonder whether he knows how many people really dig the shit out of him, you know.
I kind of got a rush when he did the In the Sky solo album, because I played that in the 70s on the radio a lot, and it was great. Mick, Graham Parker did our blues room. He said Dexter Bennett's Jumping at Shadows was a big influence, but he said most importantly, when he was living in England, that Fleetwood Mac was the band or the unit that really taught the blues to a lot of the British kids. And he said that you did a version of Jumping at Shadows, and if I can ever get a hold of it, pick it up.
We never officially recorded that, but we used to do that in concert, year in, year out. And we used to tour with Dexter Bennett, and he was a one-man situation. He had the drums going on, cymbals and all sorts of weird stuff. And he wrote that song. The song itself, I think, if B.B. King recorded that song, he would have a very successful track if he recorded that. So maybe I'll tell him tonight.
You're listening to the Blues Room live at Fleetwood's. Our guest is the legendary Mick Fleetwood. I've received quite an education from hanging out at this club in the last couple of months, so that's to your credit as far as perpetuating the blues and getting the word out to everybody. But I want to tell you, the straight-ahead Chicago-style blues were the band's hallmark in the late 60s, no doubt about it. What comes to mind is a live recording of Fleetwood Mac done at the Tea Party Club in Boston. I think it was the second time you were in America. And, you know, Jeremy sang this tune, Oh Baby. I don't know if it was a Magic Sam tune or an Otis Rush tune, but it was...
I don't remember. I remember the gig. We used to play there a lot, you know, and people like Jay Giles used to be sitting there. We didn't know them terribly well, but I've since found out that a lot of the kids in Aerosmith and that used to come and watch us playing in those days. And they're all Fleetwood Mac fans, but what we're really saying is they're Peter Green fans. You know?
Well, we're talking about Peter Green, Black Magic Woman, his tune, and of course he went into obscurity. What do you think when you hear Black Magic Woman by Santana every 10 minutes?
I'm glad for Peter, because every time it gets him played, he's getting some money. Not a lot of people know that, you see. There's an education that needs to be had. I have a band called the Blue Whale, and we do Black Magic Woman. Not always, but I always tell Ron, I said, just let them know that this is a Fleetwood Mac song, you know. And he tells a little story, you know, just what about it. But it was a huge hit all over the world, you know. And as was Oh Well. Oh Well was a big hit in a lot of countries. And it's been re-recorded about 5 times that I know. The last guy did a I think it was Thomas Dolby did a version of it. And it was not like the original, but...
Did he blind you with royalties?
Well, not me, but Peter, you know. This is all good stuff for Peter.
Hi, this is Mark Winter of the Nighthawks. You're listening to the Blues Room, and we're live at Fleetwood's.
Rock on.
Mick, Earl Vince, and the Valiants. Does that ring a bell?
Oh yeah, Jeremy's pseudonym for Earl Vince used to come on stage. We did sort of, I suppose, early Fleetwood Mac was anything from wildly pornographic to a rock and roll review show. You know, part of that, Jeremy used to come in on an Elvis Presley, a gold lame suit, and Earl Vince and the Valiants, and we had a lot of fun in those days. And I think a lot of times people can get over serious about the blues, and for sure that's where my heart is, you know, and that's who I like to listen to. We had fun with our audience because sometimes the audience got too serious about whether we could even play anything else, you know. And I noticed, like, when Robert's playing, he does a lot of stuff that comes from other people's songs. However, he makes a point of playing stuff of his own, and you have to make that transition. And it's not always an easy one to make when you are sort of in the business of playing the blues and you start writing more and more stuff that obviously maybe you get influence from how you learnt to play and what really turns you on. That's great, but it's an interesting thing. When and where do you make the move to change? Then you worry, what's going to happen if I play something that's just maybe a bit different? My sense is that you should make those moves, and then you can tie the whole thing down really well. And we managed to do that. But some people didn't like it. A lot of the real serious fans, and I mean that word serious, too serious for their own good. And we used to go the opposite way, and Peter used to start just jamming, playing Long Tall Sally and some weird sort of Rick Nelson songs, and their minds are snapping. They're going like, Jesus, what's going on? But it was sort of to shock them to say, it's okay, we're playing music.
And Teenage Darling.
Teenage Darling, yeah.
Mick, your first two LPs on Epic and the sessions produced in Chicago with Otis Spann and Willie Dixon revealed, you know, more than an affection for the blues, like you were just saying. And Blues Jam at Chess, I think, was one of them, and Fleetwood Mac in Chicago. You were out there. You were just as heavy as John Mayall as far as being into a crusade back then, back in the 60s. I mean, people were in the Summer of Love and Woodstock and all that, and you're out there in Chicago trying to get together with these guys.
That we were, and it was literally, again, I preface it by saying I was very much still learning. I played how I played, and luckily I just played in a way that suited what Peter was doing. But all that time I was really learning what was going on, who was who, and Peter already pretty much knew, and Johnny Mac. And to be playing with these guys anyhow, and then at the Chess Studios with Marshall Chess recording this, you know, it was too much, you know. Having said that, those recordings hold up, and I say that with a certain amount of pride. Fleetwood Mac, a bunch of young English guys playing their hearts out with people who we worship these people, you know. But looking back on it, we didn't embarrass ourselves, and that is a fairly good testimony to what Fleetwood Mac was, and certainly the principles with Peter and Jeremy. We were very young, but seemingly really quite old and mature musically in a way that still amazes me.
Well, we had a mate of yours in the blues room here live at Fleetwood's, Kim Simmons from Savoy Brown. He was recording Howlin' Wolf, and he was recording Muddy Waters when the Beatles were on Carnaby Street opening up shops. And I asked him if the record companies were turning their heads when he was trying to do this. That was avant-garde at the time, and you were doing the same thing. You turned around and blossomed into Fleetwood Mac right through the 1970s. Critics said, well, they've given up the blues, but that's not true. When you did Kiln House, you were doing a Fats Waller tune, didn't you do that, Hi-Ho Silver?
Yeah, exactly. I was, it's strange to say that. On the plane today, I was listening to a live BBC recording of exactly that song. I was reminded basically of stuff that I'd forgotten. A lot of crazy, wild stuff in those days. It seemed very natural. When you say the crusade, I never remember it as being a crusade. I just remembered it was a bunch of guys that identified just unknowingly with what was going on. The likes of John Mayall and Alexis Corner, Long John Baldry, they were more, if you like, educated into what they were doing, and they'd done a lot of listening. We were the next generation of young guys that just caught on to it real quick and just went, yeah, and just had fun with it. Peter, the writers in the band, made that transition that I was talking about. I think we found it easier to move away from the strict formula of just playing of blues and straight blues. And then that's when we made the album Then Play On, which started to get into harmony and just jamming.
Our guest is Mick Fleetwood. Mick, one critic said you were instruments in search of an idea, but you should have been called a collective idea in search of an audience.
Jesus. Heavy stuff. Who wrote that?
That was done back in 1969.
Well, I didn't write it, but it sounds good.
Let's focus in now on this club. What is your overview of Fleetwood's?
It's a tough business to be in. For me, the reason this club opened, hopefully to have somewhere where people can enjoy real good music. On a commercial aspect, I've done a lot of traveling in my times, and I've been to a lot of clubs, and I'd never seen the marriage done particularly well between somewhere where you can get a decent meal and listen to some really decent music. It's a real tough business to be in, and we're still learning. Hopefully my wish and desire is that we prevail and we'll be here for many years. I think we will. There's a lot of hard work, and it's a learning process for me. I'm not the Flash Harry restaurateur at all, and I rely on a lot of help from people that work here at the club, and we will see. I hope we survive. Otherwise I'll be taking a short walk to the river out there and drowning myself.
Thank you very much for joining us in the Blues Room live at Fleetwood.
You're welcome.